Where does your story begin?
Where does the story begin? Well, life's been pretty much chaos from the beginning. I don't think dealt with the best cards, but also, before I say or anything, go into like detailed things, a lot of the things were my own mistakes, not just the things that happened to me, but I was abused as a child, sexually abused, verbally, physically. My father was married 6, 7 times. That kind of messed me up a little bit. He was in and out of prison. So practically my sisters raised me, so I was always very close with them. But I started using drugs and alcohol at a very young age, I would say 11, 12 years old. That was with my mom. She'd pick me up, I'd go to her place, 6-pack, 12-packs on the table, carton of cigarettes. At that time, I thought it was the coolest thing possible because I was a kid. But then, as I grew up, it wasn't the smartest idea. Even through all the chaos, all the trauma, whatever I walked through as a child, or put myself through, there's never been a doubt where I've never not believed in God. For some reason, I don't ever remember even anyone telling me. It was just always there, even when I was little. But I remember there did come a point, when the drugs and alcohol got too bad. I was at my friend's house, and we were just all getting high, and I just had enough of it, and I just walked to the side, kind of broke down, and just said, God, you get me out of here, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And literally 2 weeks later, I was in some random Bible school that unfortunately I got kicked out of because I was still using drugs, because I was still going through so much pain, so much hurt. But that was just that's where the journey kind of started more with God. Somehow I ended up back at my mom's house. I found her in Alabama, and went to another school in Alabama. And then I came here in 2007, I think. And yeah, just kind of fell in love with the place. Went back. Like I said before, when I was younger, my sister and my other sister raised me a lot, especially my older sister. She stepped into that parenthood because she really didn't have a choice. So she was always there. She was also my big sister, my best friend, and I also looked at her as a mom. No matter what I did or how stupid things I messed up, she was always there. She might be mad at me for a day, but then she, just tell me to get back up and go again. About 3 years ago, I got the worst phone call anybody can get. My sister calls me hysterical. I didn't know if she was laughing or crying. I just couldn't understand what she was saying. And she said, he killed her. I was like, okay. So pretty much my brother-in-law murdered my sister. She was stabbed to death, and in a very disgusting way. And I guess anybody, that would just kind of rock your whole world. Everything was just stripped. Before that, life was so good. I finally had things together, a house, beautiful home, had my own little business. Everything was finally going good, and then everything was just in 1 second stripped away. I formed a habit of just, when things were bad, I would just drink. So that first year, when everything happened, I kind of kept it together. I was kind of just trying to figure out what's going on, trying to support my other sister and my niece and my nephews just to get through. And then I'd come back here, and then it would hit me because I was alone. And then the second year, you're kind of in denial. But then the third year, last year, was the worst year possible in my life. So I've been in Iceland for about 18 years, and the last 6 years I've been alone. And all that happened, so I was just done. I was broken. Like I said, I never stopped believing in God. I always had some sort of hope, hoping that one day something would change. But that year was the worst year possible. I just fell back into drinking. That's what I know. That's the habit. So I would just drink and drink and drink. And then eventually I decided, I'm just gonna pack my bags and travel. So I just traveled around pretty much Europe for most of the year. through that whole time, I was drinking heavily. And then I came back from Spain in August. And around August 13th, I kind of started to sober up. Because I knew it wasn't, my health was declining. I just knew my stomach was hurting. I was always paranoid my eyes were going to turn yellow because of just failure of my organs or whatever. And I remember that morning, I almost forgot, I counted the bottles of how much I drank within, maybe less than 2 months, and it was over 50 bottles of alcohol and Jack Daniels.
How did I get to Iceland? Well, the love for Iceland started in the 90s, 93 to 96, when my father was stationed here at the Navy base. And I just remember at that time just falling in love with the culture and the people and just creation that surrounded us. I think it was then that the Lord marked my heart for this country. Fast forward to 2017, and the Lord gave me a dream, and that dream was of Iceland just springing forth with revival. It was everything in creation had caught the spirit of revival. There was thousands of people in this valley between these mountains, and there were these beautiful purple royal flags billowing in the wind, and everything had caught the spirit. It was the lupines in the fields, it was the blades of grass, it was the wind, it was the mountains. Everything was crying out and worshiping the Father. And then in 2020, in quiet time, one evening, the Lord just whispered to my heart, prepare and go to Iceland. And having heard those words and that voice 2 other times in my adult life, I just knew it was the Father. And I said, okay, Lord, if you are calling me to go to Iceland, then you have my yes, and I will go. And it started in 2023, and it's been an adventure ever since. So what led up to meeting Daniel? Well, I had just come off of a wonderful weekend at Cottemont, which is a beautiful camp here. And I was celebrating with the Icelandic people, just, love for the Lord and just in worship and preaching. But I was still questioning, Lord, is this really where you have me? Have you really called me here? Is this really the plan? So I remember not sleeping as well. And I thought, I'm going to go to church on Sunday. I should just stay in Reykjavik the night before and just get a good night's sleep. So went to the hotel, and it was anything but a restful evening. I had picked the worst hotel to stay in. It was right above the bar scene. Everyone was hooting and hollering at all hours of the night. 2 fire alarms go off in the middle of the night, and the light from the street was like shining into the bedroom. But somehow the Lord managed to give me 3 very detailed and very specific dreams, and one of them was for Daniel. I woke up that next morning, August 19th, thinking, man, Lord, what was that about? That was so strange. So I wrote these dreams down, and then I proceed to go on the way, and I go to Philadelphia, and I'm sitting in the pews, and the next thing I know, these 2 men walk in and sit right in front of me.
And then randomly, my friend calls me and said, hey, I want to take you to this church. And in the back of my head, I'm like, heck no. I don't want to go to church right now. And he was like, it's international, it's English speaking. I was like, all right, I'll try it out. So, yeah, on that Sunday, I pretty much, I don't want to say I gave God an ultimatum, but I really did. Just like, I was broke. I was hanging on by a thread. I remember I was in the shower just literally snot crying, ugly crying. Not even, and just really crying out to God. I was that desperate. And I said, God, if you don't show up today, I don't know what's going to happen. So, went to church. I was very nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen. But in the back of my head, I just knew. I trusted God. He was going to do something. And then as I was sitting there, with my friend, the first thing, like one of the first songs come on, like, I think it was This Is the Air I Breathe, and that was the first song when I ever first felt the Holy Spirit when I was younger. And so at that time, I just knew, like, okay, God's up to something. I don't know what he's going to do, so I'm just roll with it.
Sitting in the pews, And the next thing I know, these two men walk in and sit right in front of me. And I'm just like, really? There's no way that this is the man from my dream the night before. So I'm looking at him and I'm looking away and I'm looking at him and I'm trying not to get caught like looking at him, because I was looking at him quite a bit, trying to reconcile that this is truly the man that I saw the night before. And I remember having this dialogue with the Lord saying, God, please, no, please don't do this. I'm gonna look so weird. I'm gonna look like, a freak. And, thinking about that now, it's like, that was the enemy trying to stop this encounter. He was using these words to scare me away from actually going and speaking this to Daniel. In disobedience, I thought, I'm just going to go get prayer, maybe pray for my sleeping patterns, just pray for direction, and thinking that this is a sure way to have an exit for both of us. So the prayer ends and I turn around and he's gone. And immediately, I felt convicted and I'm like, Lord, I am sorry. I'm sorry for being disobedient, forgive me. Go down to get, some coffee and some bread. And next thing I know, Daniel and his friend are standing right beside me. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you're going to have your way here.
And randomly, some American woman comes up to me saying, I had a dream about you. And my first thought, I was like, oh boy, we got one of these. But I was like, okay. And my friend looked at me, he was like, huh? But I was like, let's roll with it. Let's see what she says. She was spot on what she said. She said she had a dream about me. Talking about like my eyes were turning yellow, and God was saying it's either me or the alcohol. You have to choose.
This is the dream. I found myself in Chandler and a bearded man in the bathroom of my teenage home in Prattville, Alabama. This man was wearing a white wife beater tank and gray sweatpants. He had a well-manicured beard and very dark hair, and his complexion was tanned with red undertones. The shape of his eyes were of almonds, but the whites of his eyes were yellow. The three of us were gathered in the doorway of the bathroom, and I turned and I could see the three of us reflected in the mirror. He was taller than me. He had a solid stature, athletic build, strong shoulders, kind of boxy, and he reminded me of baseball. There was this urgency within the spirit, a pointed direction to get his attention. There was fight for life within the atmosphere. We were facing each other, and I grabbed him by the shoulders, shaking him and holding him tightly towards me. We were looking directly at each other, staring at each other eye to eye, and his eyes were yellow with extreme jaundice. Holding him and shaking him to attention, the words that flowed from my mouth were, you have to choose. You have to choose. It's the alcohol or it's God. It's one or the other. It's not both. It cannot be both. You either choose the alcohol or you choose him, but you must choose one. And I didn't know the story at that time of what he had been walking through, but both he and his friend were flabbergasted. A few weeks later, Daniel had shared with me that when I shared that part of the dream with him about his eyes, that immediately that the Holy Spirit fell on him and he was delivered of the desire of alcohol, and the oppression lifted off of him immediately. And that is just a miracle of the Lord, a true testament of the Lord.
And from that time, that was 6 months ago. And just through her act of obedience, simple obedience, my whole life was changed. And also with me stepping out into obedience and just really surrendering to God, everything changed from a simple act of obedience. And since then, life is completely different. Haven't drank. I even quit vaping, nicotine pouches, old habits just falling off. My children are great. And at the same time, I didn't know God was also going to bring someone into my life. And at that time, I was for certain I was going to be single the rest of my life, and I was okay. But God brought someone into my life, and that just changed everything as well. To have someone walk this walk with you, God just really showed up in some ways I just never imagined he would show up. So pretty much, this whole story just really, it's a story of just redemption, of what God does, and just a simple act of obedience. Because without her obedience, that Sunday, I wouldn't be where I am today. And with me completely surrendering, I wouldn't be. And for the longest time, I made things so difficult. And I feel like that's what a lot of us do as Christians. We make things so difficult. Or, it's really not that hard. God gives us simple instructions for our own safety. Like sometimes a lot of people ask me, how do you keep going for everything you walk through? Like, how do you see good in life? God just showed me there's goodness in front of you. My kids, my relationship, girlfriend, family. Those are the good things in life. Him showing his goodness. And also, one thing that really has helped me a lot is because being an addict, you pretty much live by feelings. And God has really been showing me a lot that, God's not a feeling, but it's a walk of faith. And just through all that, it's just, everything around me has just been so encouraging. And as my faith has just grown. And so 6 months later, here I am, sharing this crazy story. So hopefully this, even if it ministers to one heart, I do it all again.
Thinking back now, full circle, 180 degrees, I'm amazed by what the Lord did, and it has changed me. And I have told Daniel after our encounter that if this was the only reason that my feet were brought to Iceland, so be it. That is enough. Because it changed him, but it changed me too. It evidenced the power of the Lord, and it evidenced the wonder-working power of the Lord, that he is still active, still alive, and still relevant today in 2025. It reminds me of the fact that he will go to great lengths for his children, thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean to find his lost sheep. And that, you can't help but be changed and impacted by that. So, that's the encounter, that's the dream, that's our Sunday story, and praise God for redemption.